It sounds like an uphill battle, Maria Teresa, because young people vote less often than older people. Poorer people vote less often than wealthier people. People who've never voted before vote less often than people who regularly vote. So the Latino vote, increasing the size of it would seem to be a tough sell in a year like 2012.
It's a challenge, but what we can find, we could actually look at history and see what galvanizes the Latino community. There are 22 states that have introduced copycat legislation as Arizona's SB 1070, the anti-immigration law. And basically what happened is that we first saw that back in '93 when Pete Wilson did the same thing. Pete Wilson thought that he was going to have a great straight shot to the White House by basically saying that all the economic problems in California were Latino issues, were Latino problems. Nothing galvanized the Latino community until they started getting attacked. That was a moment of a catalyst, of a political awakening. People forget that up to that point, California was a purple state. Sometimes it went red, sometimes it went blue. It solidified the Latino vote. What we're seeing in Colorado, we're seeing in Arizona, and we're also seeing in Florida is that same galvanization. Yes, Jan Brewer just finished and she won the midterm elections, but just as it happened in California, it took 2 election cycles for the infrastructure to be built to mobilize the Latino community, because it was almost a shock to the system. I can share with you that what's happening right now in the Latino community, people care about immigration just as much as they care about jobs for the very first time in a long time, is because it's personal. Because a kid can walk into Colorado to buy a burger, and all of a sudden the person at the cash register believes that it's okay to ask for his papers, and the kid says, wait a second, I'm 4th generation. I didn't realize I was Latino until you pointed it out. There's increased racial profiling, and as a result of that increased racial profiling, that is basically making people lift their heads up and say, wait a second, people are treating me less American simply because I'm Latino, and it's not acceptable.
So when Georgia comes out with the most aggressive version so far of the look-alike bills to SB 1070, and of course SB 1070 continues to be litigated in Arizona. Oklahoma has passed similar legislation. Does that help or hurt Republicans speaking specifically to Latino voters?
It hurts, but this is only a partial assessment of what actually has happened. If you look at the Arizona bill, the only states that have actually replicated Arizona, the Arizona enforcement bill, and perhaps even made it worse, are Georgia, South Carolina, and Alabama. The majority of red states, Republicans actually kill those bills or derail them. In the case of Utah, the most conservative state in the country, Republicans passed a bill to create a work permit program for undocumented immigrants. Now, Obama didn't say anything about that. He talked about Georgia, came out straight and spoke directly to the media about that, but he didn't talk about Utah. So to generalize and say all Republicans are like Republicans in Georgia or Alabama is just not going to work.
Well, to be fair, I don't think Maria Teresa said that necessarily, but in the way you play politics and the way you leverage issues, that can't be good for Republicans, something like the Georgia law.
Absolutely, I agree with that. But it's a different scenario in the sense that 4 years ago, the rhetoric coming from Republicans, from the few Republicans that were talking about it, was very nasty. I think we've seen the rhetoric being toned down by Republicans. And I think, again, in most states, they didn't pass these bills. I think we're going to end up with a candidate who actually presents a balanced position that is well received by Latinos. So I'm really not as concerned. I don't think it's going to happen what happened 4 years ago, where congressional Republicans or state Republicans handicapped John McCain. Let's remember, Latinos remember when George W. Bush went to the Congress, knowing that he didn't have the votes for immigration reform, and sent Secretary of Homeland Security Chertoff, Secretary of Commerce Gutierrez to negotiate with Ted Kennedy. He didn't have the votes, but he went there. And what is the excuse that Obama is giving for not going to Congress? Oh, I don't have the votes. Well, one of the main jobs of the president is consensus building. You create the bipartisan consensus. But over and over, as Mario's pointing out, this individual, the President of the United States, this president cannot build consensus. He cannot work with Republicans. And that's a problem. If you're president, your job is to work with Republicans, not just to attack them. Bill Clinton could do it. Obama can't.
But to use as an example, for instance, the border. Republican politicians, prominent, nationally known Republican politicians said, border security first. We won't contemplate any immigration reform without border security first. Obama sent his Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano, to double down on border security. Interdictions are up, deportations are up, workplace raids are up. Then Republicans say, look at this guy. He's raiding workplaces and deporting people. The same people who said border security first before we'll contemplate any reform. And then you say he can't work with Republicans. It's true, he can't work with Republicans. But at least there's a backstory there. I mean, have Republicans been willing to work with President Obama on anything, including securing the border? Is there an issue, a single issue that you can name off the top of your head that they've said, yes, except for increasing the number of troops in Afghanistan, which they were all
there's one.
For, right?
There is one. At the end of last year, when the President of the United States sent a cabinet member, Geithner, and his director of budget director to negotiate with the Republican leadership the extension of the Bush tax cuts. That was real compromise. The president was willing to work with Republicans. If you do the same with immigration, if he sends Janet Napolitano and sends the Secretary of Commerce, ironically, he would probably not send the Secretary of Commerce, but the Secretary of Labor, which says a lot about his position on immigration. Let's have a conversation. That conversation has not happened. We heard the speech in El Paso. The speech in El Paso was, well, here's my blueprint. Actually, the blueprint is something that Republicans could actually work with and talk to Obama about. But then he went out and attacked Republicans. That's not the way you build compromise. You have to invite Boehner, invite McConnell to the White House and say, let's have a conversation about immigration. That hasn't happened. He's met with everyone. Eva Longoria, Pio.
I'm sure that was a very fruitful meeting, and, the Eva Longoria summit. But Mario, go ahead.
Well, look, I mean, I think Alfonso's right. I think that, as I've said before, over and over again, what he's done is attack. Now, immigration is one issue, but there's another issue of the economy. And there's no question that Obama's policies have made the economy worse. You can point to the failed stimulus program. You can point to Obamacare as being a job-destroying piece of legislation that, unfortunately, we've only started to begin to feel the negative effects of. Over and over again, Obama's had a tin ear on issues of importance to the overall American population and to Latinos, and that's jobs. We need jobs. We need to stop attacking job creators and start creating an environment in which they can go out and do what they do best, which is create more jobs, hire more people, get people from unemployment to work, to collecting a paycheck, and, by the way, also paying taxes, which increases revenue. Relying on these failed socialistic models over and over again for his economic policies has been disastrous for the country. It's been disastrous for Latinos.